What happens when determination meets prejudice in the deadliest combat zone on Earth? One woman's journey from military outcast to legendary hero will shatter everything you thought you knew about courage under fire. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Pack your bags and find the nearest teaching position. Colonel Richard Hayes barked across the Fort Campbell training facility, ripping the Special Operations Manual from Samantha Gomez's hands. Her coffee mug shattered against the concrete floor, sending dark liquid splashing across her pristine desert camouflage uniform. The 75th Ranger Regiment isn't a babysitting service for social experiments. Cruel laughter erupted from the male trainees surrounding her. Someone's phone appeared, recording every second of her public humiliation. "Maybe try teaching kindergarten instead," another voice called out, sparking fresh waves of mockery. Colonel Hayes crumpled Samantha's application and hurled it toward an overflowing waste bin. "Research proves that certain individuals lack the physical capabilities and mental fortitude required for elite special operations," he announced loudly enough for everyone to hear. "That's just biological fact." As security personnel approached to escort her out, Samantha's fingers found the worn bronze star hidden inside her jacket pocket, her father's legacy from 3 tours in Afghanistan. The tarnished metal had survived countless firefights in the mountains of Kandahar province. Her eyes, rather than brimming with tears, narrowed with icy determination. A slight smile played at the corners of her mouth. Unsettling Colonel Hayes. They had just humiliated the wrong soldier. Samantha Gomez had never been one to accept defeat gracefully. At 28, she lived in a modest apartment in Clarksville, Tennessee, with a clear view of the helicopters departing from Fort Campbell's airfield. Each morning brought the ritual of watching Black Hawks and Chinooks thunder overhead while she sipped her coffee, envisioning herself leading those same high-stakes missions. Former Army intelligence specialist with a master's degree in strategic studies from Georgetown, Samantha descended from a distinguished military lineage spanning 4 generations. Her great-grandfather had stormed the beaches of Normandy with the 101st Airborne. Her grandfather had served with distinction in Vietnam's Special Forces. Her father had been a decorated Green Beret who'd lost his life defusing IEDs in Afghanistan. When Samantha was 16, each had instilled in her an unshakable respect for military service and a burning ambition to continue their legacy of protecting others. Following her honorable discharge from Army intelligence, Samantha had accepted a civilian position with the Department of Defense, analyzing threat patterns for special operations units. The pay was excellent. Her colleagues respected her analytical mind. But her ultimate dream remained unfulfilled: to lead rescue missions in the world's most dangerous territories. For 3 years, she had applied to the elite Special Operations Selection Course at Fort Campbell, the only program that trained civilians for integration with Ranger units conducting high-risk humanitarian missions. The course, overseen by retired Special Forces Colonel Michael "Iron Mike" Harrison, maintained extensive connections throughout the special operations community. Graduates secured positions with elite military contractors and government agencies, conducting rescue operations in hostile territories. Each rejection letter felt like a betrayal of her family's sacrifice. But Samantha never revealed her disappointment. Instead, she saved every dollar from her analyst salary to afford the staggering $75,000 training fee. Weekends weren't reserved for social activities. They were dedicated to grueling physical training at military gyms throughout Tennessee, pushing herself beyond the limits most male soldiers could endure. After facing rejection twice with applications, prominently displaying her full name, she finally secured an interview by submitting her paperwork as S. Gomez. This allowed her exceptional qualifications to speak without preconceptions. What the selection committee didn't realize What nobody except her former intelligence commander knew was that during her Army service, Samantha had been the lead analyst for Operation Mountain Rescue, a classified mission that had saved over 200 civilians from Taliban-controlled territory. She understood hostage rescue operations more intimately than most instructors who would attempt to teach her. Her father's Bronze Star, presented to her during his military funeral with the flag-draped coffin, came with a whispered promise from her commanding officer. He said, "You'd serve with more honor than any of us ever could." That weathered medal wasn't merely a family keepsake. It represented her sacred vow to save lives that others had written off as lost causes. The morning Samantha had walked confidently through Fort Campbell's gates, she believed her credentials would finally silence all doubt. Instead, she found herself standing in the parking lot, coffee staining her uniform, security guards flanking her, and the echo of masculine laughter burning in her ears. But Samantha Gomez wasn't retreating. Not today. Not ever. Sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do to someone is underestimate their determination. Master Sergeant Jake Morrison, Samantha's former intelligence colleague, pretended not to recognize her when she returned to the base the following morning with proper documentation, proving her acceptance couldn't be legally revoked. "Samantha, I thought you were applying for the logistics coordinator position," he announced loudly as she entered the briefing room, drawing snickers from other instructors. Morrison had been passed over for special operations selection twice, settling for a training role instead. His failure had apparently fermented into bitterness toward anyone he deemed unworthy of achieving what he couldn't, especially a determined woman who reminded him of his own limitations. Later that week at Murphy's Pub, the local establishment where soldiers gathered to exchange war stories and build camaraderie, Morrison introduced Samantha to his circle with a smirk. "This is Samantha. She actually believes she's going to master special operations." The group erupted in laughter, beer foam spilling over glass edges. "Sweetheart, the only thing you'll be rescuing is your dignity when you wash out," said one man, his uniform decorated with patches Samantha knew he hadn't legitimately earned. She sipped her water silently, memorizing each face. One day, these same individuals would watch her surpass them in ways they couldn't imagine. Even in her apartment complex, there was no escape from constant skepticism. Her neighbor, Captain Robert Sterling, a former military police officer now working as a security contractor, consistently undermined her confidence during encounters in the hallway and mailbox area. "You realize the psychological screening alone eliminates 90% of candidates, right?" he said while checking his mail. "They'll never risk having someone crack under pressure during a real mission." When Samantha mentioned her previous experience analyzing rescue operations, Sterling countered with a condescending smile. "Analyzing missions and executing them require completely different capabilities. That's why certain people become operators, while others become analysts. It's about natural instincts, no disrespect intended." His words were always wrapped in a thin veneer of neighborly concern, as if he were performing a community service by managing her expectations. The prejudice extended beyond military circles. At the local sporting goods store, Samantha wore her Department of Defense contractor jacket with pride. It had cost a significant sum and represented her hard-won security clearance. A young girl, perhaps 7 or 8, pointed excitedly. "Look, Mom, she works with the Army." The mother quickly grabbed her daughter's hand and pulled her away with a disapproving glance at Samantha. "That's not realistic for girls like us, honey. Let's go find something more practical to dream about." The woman's words stung more deeply than the outright mockery from her male colleagues. This was how the cycle perpetuated itself. Dreams extinguished before they could take root. The obstacles weren't just social. The physical requirements for special operations selection were deliberately designed to favor candidates with specific body types and athletic backgrounds that historically excluded women. The endurance tests, obstacle courses, and load-bearing exercises had been calibrated based on decades of male-only participation. But Samantha had spent years preparing for exactly these challenges. Her morning routine began at 4 a.m. with a 10-mile run through the hills surrounding Clarksville, followed by strength training that would exhaust soldiers half her age. She studied every manual, memorized every protocol, and trained with an intensity that bordered on obsession. What her detractors didn't understand was that Samantha's motivation went deeper than personal ambition. Every night, she reviewed intelligence. Reports about civilians trapped in conflict zones, hostages held by terrorist organizations, aid workers captured in failed states, journalists disappeared in war-torn regions. Each file represented real people whose lives hung in the balance, while bureaucrats debated the political ramifications of rescue attempts. Samantha knew she could save them. She had the analytical skills to plan complex operations, the physical conditioning to execute dangerous missions, and the tactical knowledge to adapt when everything went wrong. But first, she had to survive. A selection process designed to eliminate people exactly like her as she lay in bed that night, touching her father's bronze star and staring at the ceiling. Samantha made a silent promise. She would endure whatever they threw at her. She would prove that courage and competence had nothing to do with gender. And when the moment came, when real lives depended on her abilities, she would show the world what determination looked like in action, preparing and narrating. This story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. In the arena of military excellence, some battles are fought in training facilities, others in combat zones, and the most crucial ones in the minds of those who refuse to surrender. The first week of Special Operations selection established the brutal tone for Samantha's ordeal. She arrived at the Fort Campbell training compound Monday morning to discover her assigned locker vandalized with kitchen utensils and cleaning supplies, a feather duster, rubber gloves, and a bottle of fabric softener arranged precisely where her tactical gear should have been stored. While other candidates received comprehensive training packets with updated field manuals and tactical procedures, Samantha's materials contained outdated documents with critical pages mysteriously missing. When she reported this to the administrative office, the clerk offered a sympathetic but helpless expression. "Maybe check the women's latrine. I heard some of the guys thought it would be funny to hide them there." Staff Sergeant Derek Martinez, a former Marine with half of Samantha's intelligence experience and none of her strategic analysis background, was immediately designated squad leader for their 8-person training unit. Samantha was relegated to communications duties, essentially note-taking and radio operation, while others made tactical decisions. "Nothing personal, Gomez," announced the lead instructor, Master Sergeant Craig Williams, with a thin smile. "Martinez has the natural leadership instincts this program demands." Derek's leadership primarily consisted of talking over Samantha whenever she offered tactical insights and assigning her the administrative tasks nobody else wanted. When field exercises commenced in the second week, the disparity became even more apparent. Instructor Williams deliberately assigned Samantha's team the most challenging scenarios: nighttime navigation through swampland, equipment failures during critical operations, and simulated enemy contact with minimal ammunition. Supplies. Meanwhile, he provided the male-dominated teams with standard daytime exercises and full equipment loads. The other candidates watched, expecting her to fail spectacularly. Instead, Samantha's intelligence background enabled her to anticipate enemy movements and develop creative solutions to equipment shortages. When her team completed the exercise with the highest success rate, despite the additional obstacles, Williams announced to the group, "Gomez got lucky with the weather conditions. The swamp was unusually dry. We'll reassess her performance under normal circumstances." During combat medical training, when candidates were supposed to pair up for battlefield casualty scenarios, male colleagues physically avoided Samantha. "If I got shot during a real mission, I'd rather take my chances bleeding out than have her try to patch me up," joked Kevin Torres, a stocky former Army Ranger from Texas. "Her hands are probably too small to apply proper pressure to a chest." Wound anyway. Instructor Sergeant First Class Rodriguez merely shrugged when Samantha pointed out she couldn't complete the partner exercises alone. "Form teams however you prefer. This isn't elementary school. I'm not assigning buddies." She ended up practicing medical procedures on training dummies, while other candidates worked in pairs, calling her practice partner the perfect patient, silent and cooperative. When systematic harassment fails to break someone, institutions often resort to more sophisticated forms of sabotage. By the third week, the hostility had escalated from juvenile pranks to deliberate academic sabotage. Colonel Harrison himself summoned Samantha into his oak-paneled office overlooking the training grounds. Behind him, framed photographs displayed him alongside Special Operations legends and Medal of Honor recipients, all men. "You're disrupting the unit cohesion of this class," he said coldly, not offering her a seat while remaining standing behind his imposing desk. "Your presence is distracting my most promising candidates. Perhaps you should consider transferring to our military intelligence training program. It's less physically demanding, more suitable for someone with your—" He paused, eyes flicking dismissively over her frame. Analytical strengths. When Samantha achieved a perfect score on the tactical planning examination to 100%, when the class average was 72%, Instructor Williams accused her of academic dishonesty in front of the entire group. "Nobody scores this high on advanced tactical scenarios," he announced, "especially not on their first attempt." Without evidence or investigation, her perfect score was reduced to a 75%. When she protested, citing specific scenarios and her detailed strategic solutions, Williams cut her off. "Consider yourself fortunate you're not being expelled, Gomez. Accept the passing grade and move forward." During the mid-program psychological evaluation, where candidates faced a panel of military psychologists reviewing their mental fitness, Samantha alone confronted inappropriate questioning about her emotional stability and physical capabilities. "Special operations generate extreme stress that certain psychological profiles weren't designed to handle," said Dr. Patricia Hammond, the program's consulting psychologist who hadn't bothered reviewing Samantha's spotless military psychological records. "Are you prepared for the emotional toll that combat rescue operations will take on your maternal instincts?" Many female candidates find that life or death scenarios trigger protective responses that interfere with tactical decision-making. No. Male candidate faced similar questioning about their paternal instincts or emotional responses to violence. Samantha maintained her composure, answering each inappropriate question with clinical precision, refusing to provide the emotional reaction they seemed to be provoking. The harassment extended beyond the training facility into the public sphere. Military Times, a widely read publication among service members, published an opinion piece titled, "Social Engineering Reaches Special Operations Standards Compromised at Elite Training Programs." Though not naming her directly, the article featured a blurred photograph of Samantha during a training exercise and quoted anonymous sources, claiming that traditional standards are being sacrificed for political correctness. The comment section filled with vitriol, many readers calling for a return to the days when operators were operators. Worse was the video that began circulating on military social media platforms. During a particularly challenging urban warfare simulation where instructors had programmed multiple civilian casualties and equipment failures simultaneously, Samantha had hesitated momentarily before adapting her strategy to save the maximum number of simulated hostages. Someone had recorded only her moment of tactical recalculation. editing out her successful mission completion and the identical struggles of male candidates facing the same scenario. The viral video, titled, "This is why diversity hires shouldn't lead rescue operations," accumulated thousands of comments, most echoing the sentiment, "Would you trust her to save your life?" Samantha's mother called in tears after seeing it, pleading with her to consider a different career path. "I just hate watching you suffer, Mia," she said, voicing the doubt Samantha refused to acknowledge in herself. "Your father never had to endure this kind of treatment." The most insidious form of discrimination comes wrapped in policies and procedures, making it nearly impossible to challenge. The Fort Campbell Alumni Association, a powerful network of former special operations personnel now serving in leadership positions throughout the military and defense industry, released a statement expressing concerns about maintaining the rigorous standards that have made our program the nation's premier special operations training facility. Several high-profile graduates, now executives at major defense contractors and military commands, threatened to withdraw financial support if politically motivated admission policies continued to undermine the program's legacy of excellence. Though not explicitly targeting Samantha, everyone knew she was the only non-traditional candidate in the program. The message was clear: her presence was jeopardizing the program's reputation and financial future. By the 6th week of the 12-week program, the institutional barriers became even more blatant. The Department of Defense sent a special inspector to observe Samantha's progress after receiving an anonymous complaint about safety concerns regarding candidates' psychological stability. No other trainee received this extraordinary scrutiny. The inspector, a retired Special Forces colonel in his 60s, took excessive notes whenever Samantha made the slightest error, his pen scratching loudly against his clipboard as if recording evidence for a future investigation. The program's financial office suddenly discovered an issue with Samantha's tuition payment, claiming a processing error had left her account $5,000 short, a significant sum she couldn't easily produce. They threatened to suspend her training unless she could transfer the additional funds within 48 hours, a problem never experienced by other candidates and conveniently timed. Just before the crucial Phase 3 evaluations, Samantha was forced to secure a high-interest emergency loan, adding financial stress to the psychological burden she already carried. Most egregiously, the training board voted to implement new physical fitness standards midway through the program, standards that specifically targeted physiological differences between men and women. The new requirements included minimum height and reach measurements for equipment compatibility, upper body strength tests that had little relevance to actual rescue operations, and endurance benchmarks calibrated to male athletic performance. "Safety is our primary concern," Colonel Harrison announced when implementing the changes. "These standards ensure all our graduates can handle the physical demands of combat rescue operations." The fact that Samantha had already demonstrated she could handle these demands in field exercises was conveniently ignored. Through it all, Samantha persevered. She studied longer, trained harder, and maintained a professional demeanor that gave her tormentors no additional ammunition. Late at night, alone in her apartment, she would sometimes hold her father's bronze star and whisper, "I won't let them win, Dad. Not after coming this far." The medal was smooth from decades of handling, first by her father in combat, then by her mother during years of widowhood, and now by her fingers seeking connection to her family's legacy of service. Some mornings, exhausted from studying until dawn, she questioned whether the constant battle was worth the toll it was taking. On those days, she'd force herself to review classified intelligence reports about ongoing hostage situations around the world: aid workers captured in Somalia, journalists held in Syria, diplomats kidnapped in Afghanistan. Each file reminded her why she couldn't quit. Somewhere in the world, people were counting on operators like her to bring them home. Sometimes the most important battles are won not through confrontation, but through the courage to excel when everyone expects you to fail. Sometimes the most powerful statement isn't made with words, but with the unwavering resolve to stand when everyone expects you to fall. The final phase of Special Operations. Selection loomed ahead. Operation Blackwater, a live field exercise designed to test every skill the candidates had supposedly mastered over the past 10 weeks. Unlike the controlled simulations they'd endured, this would be conducted in the treacherous terrain of the Great Smoky Mountains, using live ammunition and real-world scenarios based on classified intelligence reports. Only the top 4 candidates would advance to the live exercise, with the highest performer earning a coveted position with Titan Defense Solutions, the premier military contractor conducting rescue operations in hostile territories worldwide. Despite her superior performance in every measurable category, Samantha was ranked 5th, just missing the cutoff by a margin so narrow it was clearly deliberate. Derek Martinez, Kevin Torres, Anthony Walsh, and Marcus Rivera would be the chosen 4. Their selection justified by what Colonel Harrison called intangible leadership qualities and operational instincts that transcend written examinations. The fact that Samantha had outscored Anthony on every tactical assessment and demonstrated superior crisis management skills was conveniently overlooked. The night before the selection announcement, Samantha was working late in the tactical planning center, analyzing intelligence reports and refining her understanding of hostage rescue protocols. The facility was nearly empty, most candidates and instructors having left to celebrate the approaching end of the program. Through the partially open door of the adjacent operations room, she overheard Colonel Harrison and Master Sergeant Williams engaged in an intense conversation about Operation Blackwater's classified parameters, specifically a critical intelligence gap that could turn the exercise into a real emergency. "The satellite imagery is 3 days old," Harrison said, his voice unusually tense. "Weather conditions have changed dramatically since then. The extraction point we've designated is now completely flooded from the recent storms. If the candidates stick to the mission parameters, they'll be walking into a death trap. Should we update the briefing materials?" asked Williams. "Negative," Harrison replied firmly. "The whole point of this exercise is to test their ability to adapt when intelligence proves inaccurate. They need to recognize the environmental changes and select alternative extraction routes. Any operator worth their salt should be able to identify terrain hazards and adjust accordingly." Samantha froze, remembering Derek Martinez's confident boast earlier that day. "Tomorrow, I'm going to execute this mission exactly by the book. No deviations, no creative interpretations. Just perfect adherence to protocol." He had specifically mentioned his intention to follow the designated extraction route, regardless of field conditions, viewing strict compliance as the mark of a superior operator. "What if they don't recognize the danger?" Williams pressed. "Those floodwaters are moving fast enough to sweep away a fully equipped soldier." "Then they weren't qualified to be here in the first place," Harrison answered coldly. "Natural selection, Sergeant. The mountains will separate the real operators from the pretenders." Samantha's blood ran cold. Derek was walking into a potentially fatal situation, unaware that the terrain had changed since the intelligence reports were compiled. Her fellow candidates, despite their treatment of her, could die tomorrow because of outdated information and misplaced confidence in established protocols. She stepped into the operations room, startling both men. "Sir, you can't send them into that extraction zone without warning them about the flood conditions." Harrison's face darkened with rage. "You were eavesdropping, Gomez. That's grounds for immediate expulsion and potential court-martial." "I wasn't eavesdropping," Samantha replied firmly. "I was in the planning center analyzing terrain maps when you began discussing operational security issues loud enough for anyone in the adjacent rooms to hear. More importantly, you're about to send 4 soldiers into a death trap." The exercise parameters are classified and non-negotiable, Williams interjected. These candidates need to demonstrate adaptive thinking under pressure. Samantha pulled out her tablet, displaying detailed topographical analysis she'd been conducting. I've been studying the Smoky Mountains terrain for weeks, cross-referencing weather patterns with geological surveys. The extraction point sits in a natural drainage basin that becomes a torrential river during heavy rainfall. Based on precipitation data from the past 72 hours, water levels will be at their peak tomorrow morning. She paused, meeting Harrison's eyes directly. Derek Martinez has been struggling with environmental assessment in every field exercise. He relies heavily on predetermined protocols rather than real-time terrain analysis. Kevin Torres has poor swimming abilities, it's noted in his fitness evaluations. If they attempt to cross those floodwaters, you'll be explaining to their families why you prioritize testing procedures over soldier safety. Harrison's expression shifted from anger to uncomfortable recognition. Derek Martinez was the son of Congressman Eduardo Martinez, who chaired the House Armed Services Committee and controlled military appropriations. Kevin Torres was the nephew of General Patricia Torres, the Army's highest-ranking female officer, and a strong advocate for the Special Operations Program. If anything happened to either of them, ... Williams began, then stopped, the political implications hanging heavy in the air. Your candidates could die tomorrow unless you modify the extraction route, Samantha stated bluntly. I know those mountains better than anyone here. I've been hiking and training in that terrain since I was a teenager, long before this program existed. I can navigate the safe passages even in flood conditions. You're not even selected for the exercise, Gomez, Harrison reminded her coldly. Then, select me, she replied without hesitation. Include me as a fifth candidate or as a safety observer. I don't care about the competition anymore. I care about bringing everyone home alive. After an intense debate behind closed doors, Harrison reluctantly agreed to include Samantha in Operation Blackwater, not as a candidate, but as a technical terrain advisor with strict instructions to observe only unless lives were directly threatened. You'll go in last, after the others have had their chance to complete the mission, he said grudgingly. But you won't be competing for the contractor position. This is purely a safety measure. Samantha accepted his terms without argument. She knew this might be her only opportunity to prove her capabilities, and more importantly, to ensure her fellow candidates survived their own arrogance. She gestured to her tablet, which displayed detailed tracking information for all 4 missing teams. Derek is still heading toward the flooded extraction zone, completely unaware that his route will take him directly into water moving at over 15 miles per hour. Kevin is lost in a section of forest where 3 hiking fatalities occurred last year due to flash flooding. Marcus has a man in the water who could be hypothermic or injured, and Anthony's team has been silent for over an hour in hostile territory. Master Sergeant Williams studied the display, his face grim. Even if we authorized immediate deployment, how could one person handle 4 separate emergencies scattered across 20 square miles of mountain terrain? Samantha's response was immediate and precise. I don't handle them sequentially. I handle them strategically. Marcus's situation is the most immediately life-threatening, so that's priority 1. While conducting that rescue, I redirect Derek away from the flood zone via radio communication. Kevin's team needs navigation assistance and weather shelter, which I can provide through remote guidance until ground support arrives. Anthony's radio silence suggests equipment failure rather than casualties, but I'll verify that last. She paused, meeting Harrison's eyes directly. Sir, I've spent the last 12 years preparing for exactly this scenario, multi-casualty, rescue operations in hostile terrain with limited resources and time constraints. My intelligence background taught me to coordinate complex operations, while my mountain training prepared me for this environment. Those men are going to die unless someone acts immediately. And if you fail? Harrison asked bluntly. If we lose 5 personnel instead of 4, then you'll have the same result as if you don't let me try, Samantha replied without hesitation. Except you'll know that we attempted everything possible instead of waiting for help that might arrive too late. The operations center fell silent, except for the crackling of radio static and the steady hum of electronic equipment. Outside, the storm was intensifying, making helicopter evacuation increasingly dangerous and ground-based rescue operations nearly impossible. Harrison looked at the tactical display showing 4 separate crisis points, each representing American soldiers whose lives hung in the balance. His carefully planned training exercise had become a nightmare scenario that could destroy careers, end the program, and most importantly, cost the lives of some of the military's most promising young operators. After what felt like an eternity, he turned to Samantha with the weight of command decision heavy in his voice. Get them home, Gomez. All of them. Sometimes the greatest test of leadership isn't commanding others, but taking responsibility when everyone else's plans have failed. When seconds count and lives hang in the balance, genius isn't found in perfect plans, but in the ability to adapt, improvise, and never accept that someone can't be saved. Within minutes of receiving authorization, Samantha was airborne in a modified Black Hawk helicopter equipped with advanced communication arrays and emergency medical equipment. The pilot, Chief Warrant Officer Rebecca Martinez, no relation to Derek, was one of the few aviators qualified for extreme weather operations in mountainous terrain. Ma'am, visibility is down to near zero and these winds are gusting over 40 knots, Martinez shouted over the rotor noise. Standard protocol would ground all aircraft in these conditions. You sure about this? Samantha studied her tablet displaying real-time locations of all 4 teams, cross-referenced with topographical data and weather patterns she'd been analyzing for weeks. Chief, those men don't have the luxury of waiting for perfect weather. Get me to grid reference 847392. First, that's where Marcus Rivera's team is conducting water rescue operations. As the helicopter fought through violent air currents and driving rain, Samantha coordinated multiple rescue operations simultaneously through her advanced communication system. Her first priority was saving the training personnel who'd been swept downstream, but she couldn't ignore the other developing crises. Derek, this is Samantha Gomez. She transmitted on Martinez's frequency. I need you to halt your advance immediately. And listen carefully. Your current route leads directly into a flood zone that could kill your entire team. Derek's response crackled with irritation and disbelief. Gomez, what the hell are you doing on this frequency? Control, I'm receiving unauthorized communications from personnel not assigned to this operation. Derek, Control has authorized my deployment due to emergency conditions. Samantha replied firmly while studying Marcus Rivera's location on her GPS. The extraction zone has been flooded by storm runoff. Water levels are 15 feet above normal, moving at speeds that will sweep away anyone attempting to cross. I don't take orders from you, Gomez, Derek shot back. My mission parameters are clear, and I'm not deviating based on unconfirmed weather reports. Samantha's jaw tightened, but she forced herself to remain calm. Derek, I'm transmitting current satellite imagery to your GPS unit right now. Look at grid reference 923 to 445 and tell me what you see. There was a long pause before Derek's voice returned, noticeably less confident. The extraction point appears to be underwater. But that's impossible. The intelligence briefing showed clear terrain. The intelligence briefing was compiled 3 days ago, before the storm system moved through the area. Samantha explained while her helicopter approached Marcus Rivera's position. I need you to redirect to alternate extraction coordinates. I'm sending now. Grid reference 931 to 438. It's higher ground with multiple escape routes if conditions worsen. As Derek reluctantly acknowledged the new coordinates, Samantha shifted her attention to Kevin Torres's deteriorating situation. His team had been moving in circles for over an hour, their GPS systems malfunctioning due to interference from the storm's electrical activity. "Kevin, this is Samantha. I'm tracking your position, and you're approximately 800 meters from a ranger station that can provide emergency shelter. However, you need to move quickly because flash flood warnings are in effect for your current location." Kevin's response was barely audible through the static. "Samantha? How are you? Never mind. We can barely see 10 feet in any direction. GPS is completely scrambled, and we're running low on dry firewood. 2 of my team members are showing early signs of hypothermia." "Copy that, Kevin. I'm going to guide you step by step to safety," Samantha replied while simultaneously coordinating with the helicopter pilot for their approach to Marcus Rivera's location. "First, I need you to locate the largest tree in your immediate vicinity and use it as a reference point. From there, you'll move exactly 200 meters at bearing 045 degrees. Through her headset, she could hear Kevin relaying instructions to his team as they began moving through the treacherous terrain. Meanwhile, her helicopter was approaching the creek where Marcus Rivera's team was searching for their missing colleague. "Chief, I need you to hover over that bend in the creek," Samantha instructed, pointing through the rain-soaked windscreen. The water current should have carried anyone downstream to that location where the creek widens and slows down. As the helicopter descended through the storm, Samantha could see Marcus Rivera and 2 training personnel spread along the muddy creek bank, frantically searching through debris and fallen trees. The missing team member was nowhere visible, but Samantha's understanding of water rescue operations told her exactly where to look. "Marcus, this is Samantha Gomez coming in from above," she radioed while preparing her rescue equipment. "I need you to stop searching the banks and focus on the submerged log jam about 50 meters downstream from your position. Anyone swept away by the current would get trapped there." "Samantha? What are you doing here?" Marcus replied, looking up at the hovering helicopter. "We've been searching for over 30 minutes. Sergeant Rodriguez went into the water and never came back up." "He's alive, Marcus, but probably unconscious and trapped underwater," Samantha called back while rigging her swift-water rescue harness. "I'm coming down to get him, but I need your team to secure my safety line and be ready for emergency medical treatment." Without waiting for a response, Samantha fast-roped from the helicopter into the churning creek, her specialized equipment allowing her to navigate the dangerous current that had defeated Marcus's team. Her intelligence background had included extensive water rescue training, preparation that now meant the difference between life and death. Fighting against the powerful current, she reached the submerged log jam where debris had created a natural trap for anything carried downstream. Using underwater search techniques learned during her military service, she systematically explored the tangled branches and fallen timber until her hands found fabric, the torn sleeve of a military uniform. Sergeant Rodriguez was unconscious and trapped beneath a massive fallen oak tree, his survival equipment caught in the branches that had saved his life by preventing him from being swept further downstream. Samantha immediately began emergency air-sharing procedures while working to free him from the debris. "Marcus, I found Rodriguez," she transmitted through her waterproof communication system. "He's alive but trapped and unconscious. I need you to throw me the rescue line and prepare for medical emergency procedures when I bring him up." Using techniques that combined her intelligence training with improvised problem-solving, Samantha managed to shift the fallen tree just enough to extract Rodriguez from his underwater prison. His body was cold and unresponsive, but she could detect a faint pulse that indicated potential for recovery. As Marcus Rivera's team pulled both Samantha and Rodriguez from the water, She immediately began advanced life support procedures while coordinating the next phase of her multi-team rescue. Operation. Marcus Rodriguez is hypothermic and has water in his lungs, but his vital signs are stabilizing, she reported while performing emergency medical treatment. I need you to get him to the helicopter for immediate evacuation while I coordinate rescue operations for the other teams. But what about our mission? Marcus asked, confused by the rapid change from training exercise to life or death emergency. Your mission now is to save lives, Samantha replied firmly while monitoring Rodriguez's breathing. The exercise ended the moment people started drowning. Everything else is secondary to getting everyone home safely. As Rodriguez was loaded into the helicopter for emergency medical evacuation, Samantha's radio crackled with urgent communications from Anthony Walsh, the first contact from his team in over 2 hours. Control, this is Walsh. We've been captured by opposing forces and are being held in a simulated prisoner of war scenario. However, one of the role-playing instructors has suffered what appears to be a genuine medical emergency. We need immediate medical support. The training exercise had officially become a disaster, with multiple medical emergencies developing simultaneously across 20 square miles of treacherous terrain. But for Samantha Gomez, this was exactly the kind of complex crisis she'd been preparing for her entire military career. Anthony, this is Samantha. I'm coordinating all rescue operations. What's the nature of the medical emergency, and what's your exact location? Sometimes being a hero isn't about completing the mission perfectly, it's about saving everyone when the mission goes completely wrong. In the crucible of crisis, where impossible decisions must be made in seconds, true leadership reveals itself. Not through commanding others, but through the willingness to risk everything for people who never believed in you. Anthony, I need precise coordinates and a detailed description of the medical emergency, Samantha transmitted while her helicopter battled through worsening storm conditions toward his last known position. Behind her, Sergeant Rodriguez was being stabilized by the aircraft's medic, his breathing steadier but still requiring constant monitoring. Grid reference 956 to 429, Anthony replied, his voice tight with stress. Master Sergeant Collins, one of the opposing force instructors, collapsed during a simulated interrogation sequence. He's conscious but experiencing severe chest pain and difficulty breathing. We think it might be cardiac related. Samantha's mind raced as she calculated distances and resources. Anthony's team was located in a narrow mountain valley surrounded by steep terrain that would make helicopter landing impossible. Meanwhile, Kevin Torres's team was still fighting hypothermia and disorientation 12 miles away, and Derek Martinez remained dangerously close to flood zones despite her warnings. Anthony, I need you to listen carefully, she transmitted while studying topographical maps on her tablet. There's a small clearing approximately 400 meters northeast of your position that can accommodate helicopter landing. Can you and your team carry Master Sergeant Collins to those coordinates? Negative, Anthony responded immediately. Collins is a big man, probably 250 pounds, and we're dealing with rocky terrain in zero visibility. Plus the opposing force. Instructors won't break character to help with the evacuation. They're treating this as part of the exercise. Samantha felt her frustration mounting. Even during a genuine medical emergency, the rigid adherence to training protocols was endangering lives. Anthony, this ceased being an exercise the moment someone's life was threatened. I'm declaring a real-world medical emergency and ordering all role-playing personnel to provide immediate assistance. You don't have the authority to, Anthony began. I'm operating under emergency command authorization from Colonel Harrison. Samantha interrupted firmly. Every instructor and trainee in that area is now under my operational control until this crisis is resolved. Anyone who refuses to assist in life-saving operations will face court-martial proceedings. The authority in her voice combined with the very real possibility of career-ending consequences, broke through the artificial constraints of the training scenario. Within minutes, Anthony reported that the opposing force instructors had abandoned their roles and were helping to prepare Collins for evacuation. As her helicopter approached Anthony's location, Samantha coordinated with Kevin Torres's team, who had successfully reached the ranger station, but were reporting worsening weather conditions that threatened to trap them there indefinitely. "Kevin, what's the status of your hypothermia cases?" she asked while preparing medical equipment for Master Sergeant Collins. "Two team members are stable but still showing symptoms," Kevin replied. "The ranger station has heating and dry clothing, but we're completely cut off. The access road is washed out, and there's no way for ground vehicles to reach us until the storm passes." "Copy that. I'll coordinate helicopter extraction once I've handled the cardiac emergency," Samantha assured him while her aircraft descended toward the narrow clearing near Anthony's position. The landing was treacherous, with Chief Martinez fighting violent wind gusts that threatened to slam the helicopter into the surrounding rock faces. As soon as they touched down, Samantha leaped out with emergency medical equipment, racing through the driving rain toward Anthony's team. Master Sergeant Collins was semi-conscious and clearly in severe distress, his face gray and sweaty despite the cold mountain air. Samantha immediately began advanced cardiac life support procedures while coordinating with the helicopter's medic via radio. "Collins, can you hear me?" she asked while checking his pulse and blood pressure. "I'm Samantha Gomez, and I'm going to get you out of here." "Gomez?" Collins managed to whisper, his eyes focusing on her with difficulty. "You single quotes re ... the one they said couldn't handle pressure situations." "Well, let's see how I handle this." "1," Samantha replied while establishing an 4-line and preparing cardiac medication. "Anthony, I need your team to create a stretcher using your equipment and help me get Collins to the helicopter. This terrain is too dangerous for normal evacuation procedures." Working together with Anthony's team and the former opposing force instructors, Samantha coordinated a complex evacuation that required traversing steep, slippery rock formations in near-zero visibility. Her leadership during the crisis was absolute and unquestioned, with seasoned military personnel following her instructions without hesitation. As they loaded Collins into the helicopter, his condition stabilized enough for transport to the nearest cardiac facility. "Ma'am," he said weakly as they prepared for takeoff, "I owe you my life when this is over. I want to apologize for everything I said about female operators." "Just focus on getting better, Sergeant," Samantha replied while monitoring his vital signs. "We'll have plenty of time to talk when you're recovered." With Collins en route to medical treatment, Samantha turned her attention to the most dangerous situation still developing. Derek Martinez's team was approaching the flooded extraction zone despite her repeated warnings, and his radio communications suggested he was ignoring the alternate coordinates she'd provided. "Derek, this is Samantha. Your GPS shows you're still moving toward the original extraction point. I need you to acknowledge the coordinate change immediately." Derek's response was defiant and potentially fatal. "Gomez, I don't care what authority you think you have. I'm completing this mission according to the original parameters. My team is making excellent time and will be at extraction in 30 minutes. Derek, if you attempt to cross that flood zone, you and your entire team will die," Samantha said bluntly while her helicopter fought through the storm toward his location. "The water is moving at over 20 miles per hour and is 15 feet deep. No amount of training can overcome those conditions. I'm not taking tactical advice from someone who wasn't even selected for this exercise," Derek replied stubbornly. "Out." Samantha stared at her radio in disbelief as Derek cut communication, essentially signing a death warrant for himself and his team. She immediately contacted the operations center to request emergency intervention. "Control, this is Gomez, Martinez. is refusing to acknowledge the flood danger and has terminated communication. He's approximately 20 minutes from a position that will likely result in multiple casualties. Colonel Harrison's voice crackled through the radio, heavy with the weight of command decision. Gomez, you have full authorization to prevent those casualties by any means necessary. Do whatever it takes to bring them home. Understood, Control, Samantha replied while calculating flight times and geographic obstacles. Chief, I need you to intercept Martinez's team before they reach the flood zone. Maximum speed, regardless of weather conditions. As the helicopter raced through violent storm conditions toward Derek's location, Samantha prepared for what might be the most challenging rescue of her career, saving people from their own dangerous pride and stubborn refusal to accept help from someone they'd consistently underestimated. Through her headset, she could hear Kevin Torres coordinating with his team at the ranger station, Anthony Walsh helping to treat Master Sergeant Collins during medical transport, and Marcus Rivera conducting follow-up care for the rescued Sergeant Rodriguez. 4 separate crisis situations that had seemed impossible to resolve were being systematically addressed through coordinated emergency response. But Derek Martinez represented the greatest challenge of all, a highly trained soldier whose prejudice and arrogance threatened to kill not only himself, but the innocent team members following his leadership into disaster. Chief, there, Samantha pointed through the storm toward a group of figures moving rapidly through the forest toward the hidden flood zone. Those are our people, and they're about 10 minutes from walking into a death trap. As the helicopter descended toward Derek's team, Samantha prepared for a confrontation that would determine whether her greatest rescue operation would end in triumph or tragedy. When pride and prejudice collide with the laws of nature, someone has to choose between being right and being alive, and sometimes that choice has to be made for them. Sometimes the greatest act of courage isn't charging into battle, but standing between someone's pride and their grave, even when they hate you for it. The helicopter descended through the storm like a mechanical angel of mercy, its rotors churning the rain into a horizontal maelstrom as Chief Martinez fought to maintain control in the violent crosswinds. Below them, Derek Martinez's team moved with dangerous determination through the forest, following GPS coordinates that would lead them directly into the flooded extraction zone. Samantha could see the raging waters ahead through breaks in the tree canopy, a brown torrent of debris-filled devastation that had transformed the peaceful mountain creek into a death trap 20 feet wide and moving with the force of a freight train. Derek's team was less than 5 minutes from walking into that liquid hell. Derek, this is your final warning, Samantha transmitted on all frequencies. I can see the flood from above, and it's worse than anything described in the intelligence reports. You have maybe 3 minutes to stop your advance before you reach the point of no return. Derek's response crackled with anger and stubborn pride. Gomez, I don't know what game you're playing, but I'm not falling for it. The extraction zone is clear on our GPS, and we're completing this mission as briefed. Stop interfering with military operations. Samantha closed her eyes in frustration, realizing that Derek's prejudice ran so deep he was willing to risk death rather than accept help from a woman he'd consistently dismissed as incompetent. She opened her tactical display and made a decision that would either save his life or end her military career permanently. Chief, put us down directly in Derek's path, she ordered. Block his route to the extraction zone. Ma'am, landing in this terrain during these weather conditions is extremely dangerous, Chief Martinez warned. We could lose the aircraft. If we don't land, we're going to lose 4 soldiers, Samantha replied grimly. Those are acceptable risks in my book. The helicopter touched down in a small clearing barely large enough to accommodate its rotor span, tree branches scraping against the aircraft's hull as Martinez performed what was essentially a controlled crash landing. Before the skids had fully settled, Samantha was out of the aircraft and running through the forest toward Derek's approaching team. She reached them just as Derek emerged from the tree line, his face flushed with exertion and fury at finding his path blocked by the grounded helicopter. Behind him, 3 training personnel looked exhausted and increasingly concerned about the deteriorating weather conditions. "Get that helicopter out of our way now," Derek shouted over the storm noise. "You're interfering with a classified military exercise." "Derek, look ahead," Samantha called back, pointing through the rain toward the hidden flood zone. "Walk 50 more meters in that direction and tell me what you see." "I'm not playing your games, Gomez," Derek replied, pushing past her toward the helicopter. "Move this aircraft or I'll report you for sabotaging military operations." Samantha grabbed his arm, stopping him with a grip strengthened by years of military training. "Derek, I'm trying to save your life. Look at the water." For the first time, Derek actually looked ahead instead of consulting his GPS unit. Through the driving rain and low-hanging mist, he could see the rushing torrent that had replaced the peaceful creek shown in his mission briefing materials. The sound of churning water and grinding debris was audible even over the storm noise. His face went pale as the reality of the situation struck him. That's not possible." The intelligence briefing showed clear terrain. The intelligence briefing was compiled before this storm system moved through the area, Samantha explained, her voice gentle but firm. "Derek, if you had tried to cross that water, you and your entire team would have been swept away. No one could survive those conditions." Derek stared at the raging flood for a long moment, his military training warring with his personal prejudices. Finally, he turned to Samantha with a mixture of gratitude and shame in his eyes. You saved our lives," he said quietly, barely audible over the storm. "After everything we said, everything we did to you, you still came out here to save." "U.S. That's what soldiers do, Derek," Samantha replied simply. "We save each other, regardless of personal feelings." As Derek's team loaded into the helicopter for emergency evacuation, Samantha coordinated the final phases of the largest mountain rescue operation in Fort Campbell's history. Kevin Torres and his hypothermic team members were extracted from the ranger station and transported to medical facilities for treatment. Anthony Walsh's team was successfully evacuated, along with the recovering Master Sergeant Collins. Marcus Rivera and the rescued Sergeant Rodriguez were both receiving treatment at the base hospital. But the most significant rescue wasn't measured in lives saved or medical emergencies resolved. It was measured in the transformation of minds and hearts that had been closed to the possibility that excellence could come in unexpected forms. During the flight back to Fort Campbell, Derek sat in stunned silence as the magnitude of Samantha's rescue operation became clear. Through the helicopter's communication system, he could hear radio traffic coordinating the evacuation of multiple teams across 20 square miles of treacherous terrain. Emergency response coordinators were struggling to understand how one person had managed to simultaneously handle 4 separate crisis situations that should have required entire teams of specialized personnel. Control. This is Chief Martinez, the pilot reported as they approached the base. All personnel accounted for and successfully extracted. 0 casualties despite multiple emergency situations. Gomez coordinated the entire operation single-handedly. Colonel Harrison's voice came through the radio, heavy with disbelief and growing respect. "Say again, Chief. Are you reporting that Samantha Gomez conducted successful rescue operations for all 4 teams?" "Affirmative, Control. Water rescue, cardiac medical emergency, hypothermia evacuation, and flood zone intervention. All conducted simultaneously during severe weather conditions that grounded our standard emergency response aircraft." As the helicopter touched down at Fort Campbell, a crowd had gathered on the tarmac. Word of the massive rescue operation had spread throughout the base, and personnel from multiple units had come to witness the return of the teams that everyone had feared. might not make it home. Derek Martinez was the first to exit the aircraft. But instead of seeking medical attention or debriefing with his instructors, he walked directly to the assembled crowd of soldiers and training personnel. His voice carried clearly across the tarmac as he made an announcement that would be remembered long after the storm clouds had cleared. "I want everyone here to know that Samantha Gomez saved my life today," he called out, his voice cracking with emotion. "She saved all our lives. After months of treating her with disrespect and discrimination, she risked everything to bring us home safely. That's the kind of soldier I want watching my back in combat, and the kind of person I aspire to become." The crowd fell silent, absorbing the weight of Derek's words. Then, slowly, applause began to build, first from a few individuals, then spreading throughout the assembled personnel until it became a thunderous ovation that echoed across the airfield. Master Sergeant Williams, who had been one of Samantha's harshest critics, approached her as she gathered her equipment from the helicopter. His usual stern expression was replaced by something approaching humility. "Gomez, I owe you an apology," he said, extending his hand. "More than that, I owe you my respect. What you did today, ... That was the finest example of military leadership I've witnessed in 25 years of service." Samantha shook his hand, accepting his words without malice or triumph. "Sergeant, we all do what we're trained to do when lives are on the line. Today just happened to be my turn." But even as she spoke those modest words, Samantha knew that something fundamental had changed. The woman they had called hopeless had just pulled off the greatest military rescue in the base's history, saving the lives of the very people who had tried to destroy her dreams. The storm was finally breaking, and through the clearing clouds, the first rays of sunlight illuminated a transformed landscape, where excellence would never again be dismissed because of its unexpected source. True heroism isn't about proving others wrong. It's about saving them, even when they're wrong about you. The greatest victories aren't those that defeat enemies, but those that transform them into allies and inspire the next generation to reach higher than anyone thought possible. 6 months after Operation Blackwater, the story of Samantha Gomez's impossible rescue had rippled through every level of the military establishment, reaching far beyond the mountains of Tennessee to the highest echelons of the Department of Defense. What began as a training exercise that nearly ended in tragedy had become a case study in crisis leadership, taught at military academies across the nation. The immediate aftermath of the rescue operation created a seismic shift at Fort Campbell. Colonel Harrison, forced to confront the institutional biases that had nearly cost multiple lives, implemented sweeping changes to the Special Operations Selection Course. The program's evaluation criteria were completely overhauled to focus on measurable competencies rather than traditional stereotypes about who belonged in elite military units. The events of Operation Blackwater revealed fundamental flaws in our assessment methodology, Harrison admitted during a packed auditorium briefing to military leadership from across the southeastern United States. "We nearly lost 4 excellent soldiers because we failed to recognize the exceptional capabilities of the one person uniquely qualified to save them." The Pentagon's investigation into the incident resulted in congressional hearings about gender discrimination in military training programs. Senator Patricia Williams, chairwoman of the Senate Armed Services Committee, invited Samantha to testify about her experiences and recommendations for reform. "The military's strength has always come from identifying and developing talent wherever it exists," Samantha told the committee, her voice clear and confident in the marble chambers of Capitol Hill. "When we artificially limit that talent pool based on outdated assumptions, we don't just harm individual careers, we compromise our national security by wasting human resources we can't afford to lose." Her testimony, broadcast live on military television networks, became required viewing for officer candidates throughout the armed forces. Young women serving in remote outposts around the world watched Samantha's calm, professional presentation, and saw possibilities they had never before imagined for their own careers. The transformation extended beyond policy changes to personal redemption stories that highlighted the power of second chances. Derek Martinez, profoundly changed by his near-death experience and Samantha's grace in saving him despite his treatment of her, became one of the most vocal advocates for inclusive military culture. I was raised to believe that strength looked a certain way, sounded a certain way, came from certain backgrounds, he explained during a military leadership conference at West Point. It took nearly dying to realize that real strength is about character, competence, and the courage to do what's right when everything is falling apart. Samantha Gomez embodies all of those qualities better than anyone I've ever served with. Derek's transformation was so complete that he requested transfer to a humanitarian rescue unit, where he spent the following years applying the lessons he'd learned about putting mission success above personal prejudice. His unit's success rate in hostage recovery operations increased dramatically under his leadership, a change he credited entirely to adopting Samantha's approach to crisis management. Master Sergeant Williams underwent an equally profound personal transformation. The instructor who had once dismissed Samantha's capabilities became the program's most passionate advocate for merit-based evaluation. He developed new training protocols that eliminated subjective bias from assessment procedures, creating objective standards that measured actual performance rather than preconceived notions about candidate suitability. I spent 25 years in the military thinking I knew what excellence looked like, Williams reflected during an interview with Military Times magazine. Samantha Gomez taught me that excellence doesn't conform to our expectations, it exceeds them in ways we never thought possible. The most significant change came in the form of professional opportunities that had previously been unimaginable. Titan Defense Solutions, the elite military contractor that had originally offered positions only to male graduates, created a new executive leadership role specifically for Samantha. Her title, Director of Crisis Response Operations, came with authority over rescue missions worldwide and a salary that reflected her unique combination of analytical intelligence and field leadership capabilities. Frankly, we'd be insane not to hire her after what we witnessed during Operation Blackwater, explained Titan CEO during a board meeting that was later documented in Harvard Business School case studies. She demonstrated capabilities that our most experienced operators couldn't match. More importantly, she showed judgment and character that make her exactly the kind of person we want representing our company in the world's most dangerous situations. Samantha's new position allowed her to implement rescue protocols based on her experience, coordinating multiple simultaneous crises. Within her first year at Titan, successful mission completion rates increased by 40%, while casualty rates dropped to near zero. Her methods became the industry standard for complex hostage recovery operations, but the impact that mattered most to Samantha wasn't measured in corporate success or professional recognition. It was found in the young women who now saw military service as a viable path to meaningful careers, protecting others. Applications from female candidates to special operations programs increased by over 300% in the year following Operation Blackwater, with many citing Samantha's story as their primary motivation. Lieutenant Sarah Chen, a recent graduate of the reformed Fort Campbell program, spoke for many when she explained her decision to pursue special operations training. Growing up, I never saw anyone who looked like me in these roles. Samantha Gomez changed that. She proved that competence and courage aren't determined by gender, and she opened doors that will benefit generations of women who want to serve their country at the highest levels. The Fort Campbell Special Operations Selection Course, now renamed the Gomez Center for Crisis Leadership Training, displays a permanent memorial to Operation Blackwater in its main lobby. The exhibit features detailed accounts of the rescue operations, including tactical analysis of how Samantha coordinated multiple Simultaneous emergencies across 20 square miles of treacherous terrain. But the centerpiece of the memorial isn't a photograph or military decoration. It's her father's bronze star, donated to inspire future generations of soldiers who might face their own moments of doubt and discrimination. Beneath the display case, an engraved plaque bears a simple inscription: "Excellence recognizes no boundaries except those we accept for ourselves." 3 years after the rescue operation, Samantha returned to Fort Campbell as the keynote speaker for the program's graduation ceremony. Standing before an audience that included the soldiers she had saved and the instructors who had once doubted her, she reflected on the journey that had brought them all to this moment. "When I first walked through these gates, I believed I had to prove I belonged here," she said, her voice carrying clearly across the packed auditorium. "What I learned during Operation Blackwater is that belonging isn't something you prove to others. It's something you claim for yourself through excellence that can't be denied." She gestured toward the graduating class, which included more women and minorities than any previous cohort in the program's history. The barriers that once seemed insurmountable weren't destroyed by anger or confrontation. They were dissolved by competence, dedication, and the refusal to accept that impossible meant anything more than not yet attempted. Derek Martinez, now a decorated rescue specialist, sat in the front row with tears in his eyes. Samantha concluded her address. "Some of you will face discrimination, skepticism, and institutional barriers that seem designed to break your spirit. When that happens, remember that the strongest steel isn't forged in comfort. It's tempered in the hottest fires. Every obstacle placed in your path doesn't weaken you. It makes you unbreakable. Every door slammed shut teaches you to build your own entrances. Every time someone says impossible, hear instead, not yet attempted by someone with your unique combination of skills and determination." As the graduation ceremony concluded and new special operations specialists received their certifications, Samantha watched with quiet satisfaction as young men and women of diverse backgrounds prepared to serve their country in the world's most challenging environments. The program that had once excluded people like her now actively recruited the best candidates, regardless of traditional expectations about who belonged in elite military units. Later that evening, as Samantha walked across the base where her journey had begun, she encountered a young Hispanic woman studying tactical manuals under a lamppost. The cadet looked up with recognition and admiration. "Ma'am, you're Samantha Gomez," the young woman said, standing at attention. "I'm Maria Rodriguez. I start the Crisis Leadership Program next month, and I wanted to thank you for making it possible for people like me to serve in these roles." Samantha smiled, remembering her own younger self studying late into the night while dreaming of opportunities that seemed impossible. "Cadet Rodriguez, you don't need to thank me. You earned your place here through your own excellence. I just helped clear the path." "But what if I'm not strong enough?" Maria asked, voicing the fear that every candidate faced. "What if they're right when they say some people aren't cut out for this?" Samantha placed a gentle hand on the young woman's shoulder, feeling the weight of mentorship and the responsibility of inspiring the next generation. "Maria, strength isn't about fitting someone else's definition of what a soldier should look like. It's about having the courage to be excellent in your own unique way and never accepting limitations that others try to place on your dreams." She pointed toward the night sky, where helicopters conducted training flights against a backdrop of stars. "The sky doesn't discriminate based on who's flying the aircraft. Neither should we. Your job isn't to prove you belong, it's to be so excellent that everyone else has to raise their standards to match yours." As Maria returned to her studies with renewed determination, Samantha continued her walk across the base, reflecting on how far they had all traveled from those early days of systematic discrimination and institutional barriers. The woman they had once called hopeless had not only pulled off the greatest military rescue in Fort Campbell's history, she had rescued an entire culture from its own limitations out in the distance, Another training exercise was beginning, with diverse teams of candidates preparing to face challenges that would test their courage, competence, and character. But now they would be evaluated on their actual performance, rather than preconceived notions about who belonged in elite military units. The revolution that had begun with one woman's refusal to accept no as a final answer had transformed into a movement that would inspire generations of soldiers to reach higher than anyone thought possible. And in the end, that legacy of excellence without boundaries would prove to be the greatest rescue operation of all. Sometimes, the most important victory isn't the one that proves you belong. It's the one that ensures others never have to prove it again. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.